Hello, I'm Marina Johnson, and this is TABLEWORK, a TAPS podcast series where we interview the artists and theater makers behind our productions on what it takes to get their productions from the page to the stage. This episode is with TAPS undergraduate student Miyeon Lim. Emily wrote and directed jjim-jil-bang, a developmental stage production that is part of the TAPS 2025-2026 season. Today, we discuss her inspiration behind the play, how she is bringing the play to life, and the importance of such a play today. Emily, it is so great to have you here with us today, getting ready to talk about jjim-jil-bang, which is a piece that you not only wrote, but will be directing.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here and talk further about the show.
So, as you prepare to enter the rehearsal room, how do you imagine your perspective as a playwright shaping the process, and what ideas are you most eager to explore with the cast?
I think I will preface that something that I realized during the playwriting process is how much agency you have to craft a narrative and the meaning of quality representations. I think the intention for creating this piece was to create representation and visibility around a story I feel like is very widely experienced by many people, but there hasn't been much dialogue about it, and also especially like artistic dialogue too, something that I was interested in exploring. So prefacing that, I was thinking a lot about um, like what it means to represent this narrative on like a university stage, and I think there's a lot of room for different interpretations of the text and the occurrences within the piece. So, as the playwright who is also directing it, I'm thinking a lot about the translation of intention into representation on stage. Um, so, yeah, I think I'm excited to kind of explore what that might look like from being the one writing this piece by myself, kind of doing my own little scripts and draft workshops of the piece, and actually having like actors read it on stage, which is exciting. And for which ideas I'm excited to explore with the cast. I think overall, just this experience of girlhood is something that I'm very drawn to. I'm really inspired and moved by different Asian American women's spaces I've grown up in and surrounded myself in like the college space as well. And so I think there's so many meaningful moments of trust and vulnerability and care that occur, but also so many joyous and candid moments that occur as well in the piece. So I'm excited to help bring that to life to inform the conversations we wish to explore in the play.
What first inspired you to write jjim-jil-bang? Was there a moment or a memory or image that sparked the play and has stayed with you ever since? I'm always curious to know what prompts people to write the text that they write.
Yeah, I will say my background is I'm a Korean American young woman. My parents immigrated from Korea to the US at different points in their life. So I almost view my broader family as kind of a mixture of the Korean American experience, with some relatives being much more Korean versus others being more Americanized. And so I think that dynamic of navigating these two cultural and generational diasporas almost has generated a lot of like thought and realizations about what it means to be Korean American specifically, and the interplay of culture versus the nation in which you live in. Um, so that being said, I was thinking a lot about just like my background and my heritage, but also the close female friendships and relationships I've had in my life. I think actually a really big inspiration for like the characters and the structuring of this piece is actually my girl cousins on my mom's side of the family. So I think we have around 7 male cousins, and then it's just me and my 3 other girl cousins. So there's a lot of moments of closeness and intimacy that occur within us. So that actually helped inspire like the shaping of the writing and some of the characterizations as well. So kind of thinking of those as more of like my upbringings that inform this. I think from an experiential standpoint, there wasn't necessarily like a singular moment in time, and this is what the piece aims to explore and discuss, is kind of the cultural and generational shaping of like what it means to be like a Korean American woman, and how that shaping is really informed and to some extent pigeonholed to being defined through your physical appearance as a way of your femininity and your womanhood. Um, and so I think that being said, there's been many moments in my life where I've received comments from family members about my physical appearance, whether it was intended in a positive or negative way. Um, some striking moments I'm thinking about. There's so many, honestly. But I think like the first thing that comes to the top of my head is I think one of the first times that my grandfather saw me with makeup on is actually one of the first times he called me pretty. And I think that was around like age 17. And there's a bunch of other comments that kind of occur within these spaces. And this is also mentioned, I keep referencing to the text as well, but just like it occurs like in the everyday moments, such as, observations that are told to your face about how much you've physically changed in a good or bad way since the last time people saw you, or asking you questions like, oh, are you on a diet? Like, I noticed you didn't eat any dessert today. Um, just other comments like that, I think just my experience of receiving those comments through a long period of my life kind of led me to led my or sparked my interest in creating this production.
When what you're talking about of the, deeply personal, makes sense. The story is set in this really personal space of the jjim-jil-bang, yet it also touches on broader cultural and generational experiences. I'm curious, as you look ahead into the rehearsal process, I know you just finished auditions and are casting now, but how are you thinking about balancing the intimate with the collective in your staging?
Yeah, so I'm super excited to work in the Elam for this piece. I was actually there the other day, and it's this gorgeous, like round theater setup and this very intimate, like black box setting. And so I kind of phrased the overall nature of the piece like it's grounded in reality until it isn't. And there's moments of disruption occur through the movement sequences that the girls perform. And so in these movement sequences, the girls will be like moving in between the aisles, stepping out of the tub area, kind of bringing the audience into the piece as well. Um, I'm hesitant to say that it's a breaking the fourth wall moments, but more so um, kind of closing the negative space between the stage and the audience so that the audience can actually experience the ungrounding and the uprooting of the space until we return back to the realness of the space in which the girls are conversing in the primary tub area. And in the exploration of intimacy, not only does it occur within the fact that audience is examining on their conversations and also like their physical presence on all four sides, but also an exploration of intimacy through like the dialogue that's occurring as well within the space and like the audience being able to spectate and listen onto those conversations. Um, but yeah, I'm looking forward to exploring that more once we're in the space and we're able to begin moving around in the theater.
Even before rehearsals begin, are there particular questions or discoveries you're hoping will emerge once the play is on its feet with actors? And I know sometimes you can't predict those things, and I know that you're just beginning, but I'm curious if there's anything that you're really looking forward to seeing emerge.
Yeah, I really love this question because, like you mentioned, these discoveries might occur just unexpectedly, and that's kind of the beauty of theater and creating theater in community with others. But also, I'm excited to learn and hear from the actors and their personal thoughts and experiences and how that might inform their character choices on stage and the dynamic of being able to direct these people who have personal relationships or experiences to these topics. But for me, I'm interested in exploring kind of the shaping of the generational patterns, cultures, and behaviors and how that manifests among the four girls. I think each of the four girls are in very distinct journeys of their exploration and reckoning with the beauty and body standard that exists. There are some characters that are just beginning to recognize that this intergenerational dynamic exists among the family culture, etc. And there's some characters as well who are kind of on a more rebellious standpoint of trying to go against the beauty standard, reject it. But then you also have this very interesting in between where you have some characters who have succumbed to the standard and they're at active conflict with it. And also those who don't recognize that they're actively engaging with it and that unraveling of, oh my gosh, like I am just like the people I was criticizing earlier for their comments, think I'm excited and curious to see how the actors in these roles will begin to explore that journey of their character for themselves. But I think just more broadly as well, I'm excited to explore the question of how do we operate in this beauty standard? Should we have to operate in this beauty standard? Are we valid or invalid for choosing to accept or challenge these norms? And also, what does it look like to be patient and give grace to our loved ones that are being impacted by these standards, but also that might impact us too? So I think there's a lot of I almost want to view this conversation as like a spectrum in which people can approach their engagement with the standards that exist. But that will be really exciting to experience with everyone together.
On the design side of things, is there an element that you're particularly excited to see come to life? I'm curious how the set and the themes of body and beauty standards are influencing both the visual and physical world that you're envisioning.
I think the area of design that I'm super excited to see come to life is costuming. For context, in the traditional Korean bathhouse setting, you actually are required to be naked in the bathhouse before you enter the communal bathing areas. Obviously, granted, this isn't a real bathhouse, and I also don't want my actors having to go naked on stage if they're not comfortable with that. I think there's a lot of room to play with the costuming to represent the physical space of the bathhouse, but also represent the represents or metaphorically represents the vulnerability it requires to be within that space, given that you are naked with a bunch of strangers. Um, in terms of how these design elements are interacting with each other to influence the world that we're creating, I think it's exciting to see the balance between realness and artificiality of the space, because the space is it should feel pretty much real to some extent when you enter. It might feel a little bit out of touch because if you haven't experienced a Korean bathhouse, it might be like an unfamiliar space. But then the design elements help bring to life the characters and the energy, the intimacy we are trying to create. But then when we have these movement sequences that occur within the piece, they help disrupt that realness that we're feeling and instead uproot the world and shift it towards a more like a world that might feel a little bit more out of time, out of touch. And so I think using the design elements to explore those two worlds will be very interesting to see, and how the space transforms um, with all these elements, making them come to life.
Oh, definitely. When the audience leaves after seeing the piece, I'm curious what kinds of conversations or reflections you hope to be having with each other. Of course, we can never predict, and we don't always want to, even speculate. But if there were some things that you were hoping audiences would be talking about or reflecting on, what might that be?
Yeah, this is a question I've been considering very heavily, not only throughout the writing process, but even before I pitched this piece to the department. I think my largest hope for the piece and for the audience takeaway is honestly to make visible of the invisible. A common feedback that I've heard from many people who've encountered this piece is that they wish that these conversations would have happened more frequently, and they're very grateful for the space that we are creating to make these experiences visible to a wider public eye. Um, and I definitely do agree with that sentiment. I think that's also why I chose to write this piece, is because these conversations are not spoken enough about in families, in cultures, um, even like in friend group settings, in many different fronts. We wish to turn a blind eye and ignore these patterns versus come to terms with honestly like the normalized violence that has occurred of these standards that we hold these young women to. And I think there's so much power and reclamation in being able to reclaim what you've been told to keep to yourself out of fear of judgment, fear of isolation, etc., and be able to bring that on stage for people to interact with and witness. Um, and I also think that these conversations that I personally have been exposed to around beauty standards don't typically come from a culturally informed context. And sometimes I do feel that these conversations can feel a little bit reductionist in their discussions of what people actually go through and what it means to feel like you are obligated to perform for a certain standard, especially if that standard is being dictated and reinforced by your culture and your family. So I think just overall, yeah, the making of the visible or the making of the invisible into the visible is something that I hope that the audience is able to reflect upon. And also, I think I have reservations to use the word empathy because these experiences of our people are of people's individual experiences, but I think helping increase understanding around these conversations and these dynamics are something I'm looking forward to having the audience reflect on.
Really beautifully put. And I love the idea of really being, culturally conscious or culturally informed in these kinds of conversations, because especially if people are, living a hyphenated identity, or existing within several cultures, it's, I think, particularly interesting to have more nuanced conversations around these things instead of really, as you said, flattening them into one kind of conversation. So exciting that the audience then is, empowered to have their own conversations about their experiences after seeing, everything that you are putting on stage with the actors. Um, the last question I have for you is really just about something that you hope people, maybe collaborators in the rehearsal room or audiences in the performance, what do you hope they'll notice or carry with them that we haven't touched on yet in today's interview?
Yeah, this question is super fun to think about. I'm kind of resonating with 2 points. The first one being, what does it mean to center care in our theater making practices and processes? Um, as I've mentioned previously, and like the program note will mention this, but there's a lot of topics and discussions that are subject to content warnings. And given the exploration of these topics, especially the frequent exposure to these topics in the rehearsal room, production meetings, etc., I want to really make sure that I, as a director, am committed to making sure that we are centering care, empathy, and kindness in the process, and giving people space for them to practice their own ways of care throughout a process that can feel heavy at times. And I'm hoping that the audience will feel that not only in the space that we are creating together, but also in the interactions that they see between the characters as well too. And I think the second thing overall that I'm interested in bringing to life and I'm excited to bring to life in the process and in the performance is, as previously mentioned, like the moments of joy that exist within this show. I think it's really easy to look at the synopsis and information you might be seeing about the show, be like, wow, the show sounds really, really dark and heavy. And I certainly do think that there are times where the content can become more heavy, and that heaviness is produced as a product of the realness and the relatability of the topics. There are also so many moments of joy and laughter that occur within the show. I remember being surprised that some people found the first 10ish pages of the production like very funny, which I wasn't anticipating as the writer, but I think that does demonstrate like just like the value and the meaning of being able to access spaces created by women that are centering like care and friendship and love. And so I'm really hoping that the audience is able to resonate with, but also experience the ups and downs and the trials and tribulations of being a young woman navigating young adulthood overall. So, yeah.
That's really beautiful. I think you're right that whenever there is so much care put into the process, the audience can always tell. And I know that this audience member is really looking forward to getting to experience this play and this world you're building for us. So thank you so much for today and for giving us insight into this process.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.